Saturday morning, June 22, Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. Before sunrise, the streets are quiet, peaceful. A black Ford Explorer eases into the driveway of a suburban home. Red and blue lights flash across the garage, just like a police cruiser. It looks official. But the man inside isn't law enforcement. He steps out wearing full police gear. Vest, badge, duty belt. Calm, focused, like he's answered calls 100 times before. He walks up to the front door of Representative Melissa Hortman's home, one of the most powerful lawmakers in the state. Inside, her husband's already awake. Maybe he's making coffee, maybe feeding the dog, wondering why a patrol car is outside this early. He opens the door, one shot, no warning, he drops instantly. Melissa screams from inside. A neighbor hears it and dials 911. Within 90 seconds, real officers are speeding down the street, but they're already too late. Melissa Hortman is down, a leader, a voice for her community. Shot in her own home where she thought she was safe. And that wasn't the only attack. Just blocks away, around the same time, another home is targeted. This one belongs to State Senator John Hoffman. He and his wife are hit inside their kitchen. Both survive, barely. The shooter vanishes. But he leaves something behind in the SUV, a laminated hit list, dozens of names, addresses, political affiliations. These weren't random attacks. This was planned. Names on the list included elected officials, pro-choice leaders, LGBTQ+ allies, even Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. This wasn't just violence. It was an attempted political purge. And the person behind it, not a known criminal, not some online extremist. His name was Vance Boelter, 57 years old, a pastor, a businessman, a former government appointee, no record, no public threats, nothing that raised alarms. He once stood beside the governor, had been praised for his integrity and judgment. Now he was the most wanted man in Minnesota. His SUV was made to mimic a squad car. Light bars, reinforced bumpers, tactical gear. Everything looked real enough to fool anyone in the early morning dark. But Boelter wasn't pretending to be a cop just for show. He was pretending to be justice. He had one mission: eliminate the people he believed were destroying America. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment act. He had maps, sermon notes, voting records. He had been preparing. And he believed with every fiber of his being that this was divine work. That morning, instead of preaching, he rang doorbells and pulled the trigger. No one saw it coming. He'd spent years in churches, sat in government meetings, smiled for Christmas cards, prayed for strangers. He looked like he belonged. Until the second he opened fire. What followed would shake the nation, not just because of what he did, but because of who he was. A trusted voice turned domestic threat, a man of God carrying a gun. And in a nation already torn apart by division, he came terrifyingly close to something unthinkable: a purge in the name of righteousness. Before the gunfire, before the headlines, they were just neighbors. Melissa Hortman was more than a politician. She was a mother, a wife, and a fierce advocate for education, environmental justice, and women's rights. To the people of Minnesota, she was a leader who listened. To her community, she was the person who showed up not just on election day, but at school events, local fundraisers, town halls. She wasn't flashy. She didn't chase attention. But when she spoke, people leaned in. Her husband, Eric, kept a low profile. He wasn't in politics. He preferred his role behind the scenes, supporting Melissa, raising their kids, and volunteering in the community. Their home in Brooklyn Park sat on a quiet street. A modest two-story house tucked between rows of trimmed lawns and summer flowers. It was supposed to be a place of peace. Instead, it became a crime scene. Just after 5:30 a.m., as the neighborhood still slept, the front door opened to what looked like a responding officer. The flashing lights outside didn't raise suspicion. The uniform looked real. But within seconds, Eric lay on the floor, struck by a single round. Melissa's screams shattered the stillness. When real officers arrived, it was chaos. Bullet holes through the siding, shattered glass on the porch, blood on the entryway tile. Melissa was found wounded, unconscious. Only one of them would survive the morning. Less than 2 miles away, another home was under siege. State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Sandy were finishing breakfast when shots tore through their kitchen window. A bullet missed John by inches. Sandy was hit in the arm. Somehow they managed to crawl to safety and call for help. Both lived, but the scars, physical and emotional, would run deep. Senator Hoffman had worked alongside Melissa for years. They championed many of the same causes: They'd been in meetings together just weeks before. Now they were both on the same target list, hunted in their own homes. As officers swarmed both locations, they found the first major clue left behind in the suspect's SUV. A laminated document, color-coded, alphabetized, dozens of names, some marked with red stars, others underlined. This wasn't random. This was a list of political figures, nearly all Democrats. Many known for championing progressive issues, reproductive rights, LGBTQ+ protections, climate reform, among them. Local city council members, state senators, nonprofit leaders, even national figures like Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. It wasn't just a list, it was a plan. Brooklyn Park went into lockdown, schools delayed opening. Officers guarded homes around the city. SWAT teams secured public buildings. Families on the list were rushed into protective custody. The neighborhood where Melissa lived turned into a grid of flashing lights, police tape, and news vans. Reporters arrived within the hour. But for the families inside, it was still sinking in. Someone had walked onto their block, dressed like a protector, and opened fire. The crime scene wasn't just about what happened inside those homes. It was what those homes represented: safety, normalcy, trust. And in one terrifying morning, all of that shattered. These victims weren't just lawmakers, they were husbands, wives, parents, friends. They had sat in community meetings, passed laws. Saturday, June 22, Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. 5:29 a.m. The sun isn't up yet, the streets are still, most of the neighborhood is asleep, but not him. A black Ford Explorer rolls slowly down a quiet suburban street. On the roof, flashing red and blue lights. The kind that make neighbors peek through blinds thinking, police must be responding to something, but nothing's wrong on this block. Not yet. The vehicle pulls into a driveway. The house belongs to State Representative Melissa Hortman. Inside, Melissa's husband, Eric, is already up. Early riser, maybe making coffee, maybe feeding the dog. He notices the lights outside, doesn't panic. They've had officers stop by before, part of the job. Eric walks to the front door, he opens it, and that's when it happens. One shot, no words, no warning. Eric drops instantly. From across the street, a neighbor hears it, thinks it's a firecracker, then hears Melissa scream. A second later, real 911 calls start flooding in. Inside, chaos unfolds. Melissa is now face to face with the man who just attacked her husband. He's still in uniform, vest, badge, duty belt, everything looks official. But what he does next confirms the truth. He's not here to serve. He's here to finish something. Another shot rings out, then another. Officers arrive, guns drawn but hesitate. The man inside the house looks like one of them. They shout commands. It's unclear what they see through the window. Then a bullet shatters the glass. Officers return fire. But by the time they break into the house, the shooter is gone. He slipped out the back, left his SUV behind, and vanished into the early morning haze. 5:45 a.m. Police clear the house. Eric is gone. Melissa is barely hanging on. She's rushed to the hospital. Outside, officers search the abandoned SUV. What they find sends a chill down every spine. A laminated kill list, color-coded and alphabetized. Dozens of names, elected officials, advocates, public figures. Maps, notes, phone numbers, tactical gear. Multiple burner phones. Sermon notes with phrases like spiritual war and false shepherds. This wasn't a breakdown, this was a blueprint. 6:00 a.m. Another 911 call. Just a few blocks away, another shooting. The home of State Senator John Hoffman. Gunshots tear through his kitchen window. John and his wife Sandy are hit. Bleeding, panicked, but alive. They manage to call for help. By the time police arrive, the suspect is gone again. Two attacks back-to-back, both lawmakers, both known for progressive policies, both hit in their own homes before sunrise. 7:00 a.m. Brooklyn Park is locked down. Helicopters buzz overhead. SWAT teams fan out. Lawmakers are evacuated. The FBI is called in. Every name on the hit list is placed under immediate protection. The SUV is impounded. What's inside confirms the worst. The man they're hunting didn't just snap, he was on a mission. And that mission wasn't over. Investigators trace the vehicle to one name, Vance Boelter, 57 years old, no felony record, no red flags in background checks. But what they start uncovering next will shock even the most seasoned agents. Because Boelter wasn't a stranger to politics, he was once part of it, a state appointee, a pastor. A man who had been in the same rooms. June 22, 7:15 a.m. The black SUV is towed from the scene. Inside it, more than just gear. Investigators find tactical body armor, a fully loaded handgun, false police decals, multiple prepaid phones, and that laminated kill list. Dozens of names, every one tied to politics. Some are national figures, most are local, nearly all lean progressive. One name is underlined twice in red, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. This wasn't about robbery, it wasn't personal. It was ideological. Within the hour, FBI agents are involved. Digital forensics begins working on the SUV's onboard system, fingerprints, registration, GPS history. Then they get a name, Vance Boelter. 57 years old. No criminal record, no mental health flags, not even a history of violent language online. He's not what anyone expected. In fact, his name had once appeared on something very different. A state appointment list. In 2019, Boelter had been chosen to serve on Minnesota's Workforce Development Board, handpicked by the governor. His file was clean. He was praised as a man of integrity and good judgment. He even ran a security firm called Praetorian Guard Services, offering armed patrols and executive protection. His vehicles, Ford Explorers with fake police decals and flashing lights, looked nearly identical to real squad cars. Suddenly, everything made sense. Boelter didn't just throw on a fake uniform, he built an entire identity around it. And it was all legal, the light bars, the gear, the badge-style patches, registered under his business. But the next discovery would shake the case wide open. Digging into his background, agents uncover another side of Boelter. He wasn't just a businessman. He was also a pastor, one who had spent years preaching abroad in places like Lebanon, Gaza, and the Congo. His sermons weren't televised, most weren't even public. But in one 2023 video recorded in the Congo, he delivers a chilling message. America is confused, men don't know their men, women don't know their women. The enemy is already inside their souls. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't foam with rage. But his words were clear. He believed the country was spiritually corrupted and that elected leaders were responsible. Back home, Boelter kept that side mostly hidden. He didn't post political rants, didn't shout at neighbors. To most, he was just a clean-cut religious man who traveled a lot. But inside his digital trail, sermon notes, recorded voice memos, cloud storage files, investigators find something else. Maps, voting records, personal notes. Every victim on that list wasn't just a name, they were labeled. Pro-abortion, drag event supporter, godless policy advocate. Some were marked watch, others were labeled ready. It was more than a list, it was a doctrine. 8:00 p.m. June 22. Just 15 hours after the first shot was fired, a state trooper spots someone walking alone along a remote stretch of highway near Green Isle, Minnesota. It's Boelter, no resistance. No chase, just silence. He raises his hands and surrenders. Inside his backpack, another copy of the list. More names, more addresses, more maps. He wasn't done. But here's where it gets even darker. Investigators search his vehicle again. In the glove box, scribbled on a napkin, is a password. It unlocks his private cloud drive. And what's inside makes even veteran agents stop cold. Voice memos, dozens of them recorded in the days leading up to the attack. In one, he speaks directly to his children. I know you'll hate me for this, but I couldn't stand by and let these people keep leading. In another, he addresses the church. You pray too much and fight too little. The devil doesn't care how long you kneel, only that you never stand. His tone, not angry, not desperate, just sure. That was the most disturbing part. He didn't sound like someone unraveling. He sounded like someone on a mission. June 23, Minnesota State Police Headquarters. In a quiet interrogation room, Vance Boelter sits cuffed to a steel chair. He's calm, stoic, not angry, not distressed, just certain. Detectives ask the obvious question, why? Why impersonate a cop? Why target lawmakers? Why pull the trigger? Boelter doesn't flinch, he doesn't yell, he doesn't. As agents comb through the evidence, the same message shows up again and again, in handwritten notes, in voice memos, in sermons. America, Boelter believed, had been spiritually hijacked. He saw leaders not as officials but as enemies of God, guiding the nation toward destruction. To the outside world he was quiet, respectful, law-abiding, but inside he saw himself as a soldier, and this was war. The sermons tell the story. Back in 2023, Boelter delivered a sermon in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It wasn't live-streamed. It wasn't for media attention, but it was recorded. In it, he says, "The leaders in America no longer serve truth. They serve the culture of confusion, of death. They are possessed by darkness." He believed abortion was murder, that LGBTQ+ rights were perversions. That drag events, sex education, and even inclusive policies were evidence that the devil had infiltrated the system. He wasn't vague, he didn't say maybe. He spoke like a man who knew. And he didn't believe reform was possible through elections. He believed America had to be cleansed. The hit list was more than a list. Each name wasn't just selected at random, they were carefully researched. Boelter had noted which policies each person supported, who had voted for pro-choice bills, who had spoken at pride events, who had endorsed progressive immigration laws. Next to some names, he scribbled single-word labels. Lost, corrupt, as enemy, judgment ready. It wasn't rage, it was classification. These weren't people to him anymore, they were threats to be neutralized. The gear, the planning, it was all legal. One of the hardest facts for investigators to swallow. Almost everything Boelter used was completely legal. The uniform, purchased for his private security company, the SUV, registered under his business name, the weapons, owned legally, no violations, the tactical equipment. Bought online, no flags, he didn't break in to steal this stuff. He built it piece by piece right under everyone's noses. And because he never ranted publicly, never made threats online, never showed outward aggression, no one thought to look closer. The voice memos were a window into his mind. In one recording labeled "To the Church," Boelter says, "You've been preaching peace while your country burns. I loved them, but they led us astray. The devil doesn't fear your worship. He fears your resistance." In another address to his son, he says, "One day you'll understand I didn't want this. But God didn't ask for my comfort, he asked for my obedience." It wasn't hatred, it was conviction. And that's what made it so dangerous. He didn't act out of chaos, he acted out of clarity. The chilling twist, one of the people on Boelter's list, Senator John Hoffman, had once served on the same state board as him. They had sat in the same rooms, shared polite conversation. July 15, Minneapolis. The courthouse is packed. Reporters, survivors, lawmakers, families, they've come to see the man who shattered their peace up close. Vance Boelter, now in an orange jumpsuit and shackles, walks in slow and silent. He looks more like someone's grandfather than a domestic threat. He doesn't speak, doesn't glance at the gallery, he just sits calmly. But when the judge asks for his plea, Boelter doesn't say guilty. He doesn't say not guilty. He says, "I will speak when the Lord commands me to." A gasp ripples through the room. This wasn't just a legal proceeding, it was a reckoning. The prosecution comes out strong. From the start, prosecutors lay it all out. Bodycam footage from officers arriving at the scenes. Ballistics reports tying the same firearm to both homes. Surveillance video of Boelter's SUV pulling into Representative Hortman's driveway. Voice memos he left behind declaring his obedience to God. They show the laminated kill list with dozens of names, all organized, researched, and labeled. The courtroom watches as the gear is displayed. A uniform, a tactical vest, a fake badge, and an SUV modified to look like a real police cruiser. Then they play the memo Boelter recorded to his church. "You pray too much and fight too little. The devil doesn't care how long you kneel, only that you never stand." For many in the room, that moment shifts everything. This wasn't insanity, this was ideology. The defense pushes back. Boelter's attorneys argue mental instability. They say he suffered emotional collapse after years of spiritual burnout, financial hardship, and personal isolation. They bring up his failed business, his obsession with morality, his lonely international trips. They say he was searching for purpose and lost his way. But the prosecution counters, and they do it with a timeline. Boelter planned this for years. They present sermon transcripts, handwritten notes, travel records, and purchases dating back almost a decade. Tactical gear, burner phones, map routes, all documented, all deliberate. They show how each victim was picked based on public votes, affiliations, and causes. This wasn't a man in crisis. This was a man following a plan. Then come the victims. The courtroom listens to 911 calls from that morning. Melissa Hortman's voice weak fading. John Hoffman describing bullets through his window. The cries of Sandy Hoffman bleeding and in shock. A neighbor sobbing as they describe watching a man in uniform shoot someone like it was nothing. On the stand, survivors talk about their fear. One lawmaker says, "I served on a board with him, we shook hands. I had no idea I was on his list." Another says he didn't see me as a person, he saw me as a symbol and he wanted to erase it. The verdict, after just 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returns. Guilty on all counts. First-degree murder, attempted murder, impersonating a law enforcement officer, use of a firearm during an act of terrorism, planning and attempting domestic political violence. The judge doesn't hesitate, life in prison. No chance of parole, Boelter doesn't blink. Some say he smiled, others say he whispered a prayer, but outside the courtroom the fallout begins. The headlines are relentless. Pastor turned assassin. Kill list in the pulpit. Trusted voice, deadly belief. Citizens demand answers. How did someone with extremist views get appointed to a state board? Why weren't his fake police SUVs flagged? How did no one see the signs? The governor's office scrambles. Committees are formed. Background checks are reviewed. Private security firms face tighter regulation. Churches across the Midwest are split. Some call Boelter a fallen man. Others say he was never a real Christian, just a wolf in disguise. But on social media, the trial was over, the verdict was clear. Vance Boelter guilty on all counts, sentenced to life in prison, no chance of release, no second chance, justice had spoken. But for many across the country, something still felt unsettled. Because this wasn't just about one man, this was about what he represented. Boelter didn't come from the shadows. He wasn't living in a bunker surrounded by red flags. He served on government boards, he preached in churches. He ran a licensed security firm, he smiled in public, he prayed over meals, he passed background checks, he looked like someone you'd trust with your children, and yet, he built a hit list. He turned a religious mission into an excuse for murder. He stood on a porch, rang the doorbell, and opened fire, all in the name of saving the country. And that's what scares people the most, not that he was evil, but that he looked normal, clean record, no public rants, no criminal past, no warning signs on social media, just silence, until it was too late. So now we ask, how many more are out there? Quiet, calm, convicted, waiting for their divine signal, waiting for their version of justice. Boelter believed he was chosen. He thought he was doing the right thing, and that's what made him so dangerous. Not a man lost in chaos, but a man lost in certainty. He didn't scream, he didn't threaten online, he didn't post manifestos, he just watched, he waited, he made a list. And one morning before sunrise, he declared war. But here's the chilling part. He didn't think he was committing a crime, he thought he was answering a calling. In one of his voice memos he says, "I didn't hate them, I just couldn't let them keep leading." In another, "I prayed they'd change, but they didn't. So I had to stand." He never sounded unstable, he sounded convinced. And that's the kind of radicalization we rarely see coming, the quiet kind. The kind that grows in church pews, not chat rooms. That wears a cross, not camouflage. That blends in until it doesn't. In the aftermath, the country asked itself, how do we spot someone like this? How do we draw the line between freedom of belief and the moment that belief becomes a weapon? How do we keep people safe without criminalizing faith? There are no easy answers, only hard questions. The real damage wasn't just the bullets fired, it was the breach of trust. A pastor became a predator. A protector became a predator. And a man once welcomed into the halls of government tried to tear it all down from the inside. And what if he hadn't been caught? What if no one recognized the SUV? What if officers had arrived just 1 minute later? What if he'd moved to the next house on that list? Or the one after that? What if that laminated sheet of names wasn't the end, but just the beginning? This wasn't just an attack on people. It was an attack on the idea that public service is safe, that you can serve your community without fear of violence, that your home is still a home, not a target. And those ideas, they're harder to rebuild than broken windows. So here's the final thought. Maybe the question isn't, how could this happen? Maybe it's, how many more like him are still out there? Not hiding in bunkers, not ranting on live streams, but walking among us, wearing smiles, holding Bibles, blending in, waiting, because sometimes